This is everything you might have missed in 1.20. And hey, the YouTube god bets me that it's impossible to subscribe to the channel before this warden hits the ground. So to prove them wrong, let's push the warden off the top and start the timer now. And even if you subscribed after, thank you, it helps out a ton. Minecraft's music is iconic, and I'm not just talking about the discs that we find in the game, but also the background ambient tracks that'll play while you're exploring your world. But because of how iconic certain tracks are, especially the ones that have been in since C418 did them, it can be easy to miss some of the newer ones that we now get to see. And so I wouldn't blame you if you didn't notice the 4 new music tracks that we got added into the game in 1.20, those being A Familiar Room, Bromeliad, Crescent Dunes, and Echo in the Wind, which you can find in the Cherry Groves, the Desert, the Jungle, the Badlands, and Flower Forest biomes respectively. And honestly, speaking as someone who usually turns off the music in-game so that we don't have it recorded for videos, I know I for one almost missed these, so I'd count myself in this list too. In 1.20, we got a new kind of wood block to use with the addition of bamboo blocks. Or at least most of those bamboo blocks we're able to use as wood. Since strangely enough, the Mosaic bamboo is the only wood that cannot be used in other recipes. And instead, all they're good for is fuel. I mean, I guess they're good for decorating too. I like using it in spaghetti like this one, that was showed in a build hack video in the past, but if you wanted to craft with it, it was useless. Which, that's pretty rough. Even the nether stems you're able to use this way, but those also aren't able to be used as fuel, so maybe that's the trade-off. While the Amethyst item does have a use through spyglasses and calibrated skulk sensors, it was in 1.20 that our blocks of Amethyst actually got a new behavior. And that would be that if you placed a block of Amethyst next to a skulk sensor, then when the skulk sensor received vibration, that block of Amethyst would re-emit the frequency as a separate vibration at this location. And this is a technical feature that was called vibration resonance. And the reason this was added in is so that players would have a way to move vibration frequencies across long distances without having to recreate it naturally. And so if you're using vibrations in your notification system, then you don't always have to have it explode to give off the explosion level sound. Seems a lot safer for all of us. Now the only bigger problem is, how do you know what vibration frequencies are without looking up a wiki? I mean, I do Minecraft for a job and I still don't know. And maybe that's why only technical players notice this at all. It wasn't just our background music that got different sounds in 1.20, but also our step sounds. Since now, whenever you walk on a block, it would play a step sound in all cases, which seems like it would make sense, but in the past, you wouldn't hear any sounds from your footsteps if you were walking along the edge of a block with air or fluid that was next to it. And so just tiptoeing like this, no sounds. But it's not just that we get sounds while walking next to fluids, but we also have the ability to hear sounds while we're inside of fluids, since walking on the ocean floor in this update would also produce a step sound for the block that you were stepping on at a lower volume and pitch, making it sound like it's underwater. And for an update that added in the warden and all these different sound frequencies, I think it makes sense that they also paid close attention to other sounds in the game. And when you notice it, it's hard not to appreciate it. Alright, pop quiz. Which potion affects this particle? Now, if you couldn't guess, don't worry, I can't either. And apparently Mojang knew that too, because that's why they differentiated between which one was the wither effect particle and which one was the potion of slow falling. Since prior to 1.20, they just looked way too similar. And it was in this update that they finally gave them both a much more distinct color. Although I will say that distinguishing it with particle effects is not the best way to find out what someone has as a potion. I mean, especially considering that particle effects can start to get muddied in color before the 1.21 update. And at that point, who cares if you're able to tell the difference? If you have both of them, it just blends in color anyway. When we talk about a new Minecraft update, we usually like to talk about all that they've added in, or at the very least changed. So it's usually a lot less fun when we talk about stuff that they removed. Although, this one might have been for the best. Like all other Minecraft changelogs, this one referred to that Mojang removed Herobrine, which I know is a cheesy ongoing joke, but I honestly just have to say that I love that it's been going on for this long. In 1.20.2, Mojang revamped how lucky we were going to be when trying to get certain enchanted books in certain structures. And so, it turns out, if you're looking for your best chances of getting something like mending, then you'd have to go down to the ancient cities. But if you wanted efficiency enchantments, mine shafts were your best call, which I guess makes sense, and that's probably also why we have a good luck at finding quick charge inside of pillager outposts. I mean, they need it for the crossbows. Although when you start looking at what generates inside of desert and jungle temples, it seems like they were just stuck for picking one, since both of these just have a higher chance of giving us unbreaking. I mean, there's traps in both of them, maybe that's the reasoning, but with the potential changes that Mojang wants to implement for villager trading for enchanted books, where it would be harder to get certain books from certain kinds of villagers, this might be handy knowledge to have on hand. At the very least, you can stock up on your mending and unbreaking before any change gets added into the game permanently. Horses have never been particularly well loved in Minecraft ever since the elytra was added in. But it seems like 1.20.2 changed that, since ever since this update, if you're riding on a mob like a horse, you'll be protected from all small mobs, like baby zombies. And then if you're riding something like a camel, then all standard-sized mobs will not be able to hit you. Which it's hard to say that these are better for evading mobs than just flying away entirely, but if you're trying to move mobs on the ground floor, this is also particularly useful. And especially because with a camel, you're able to have your friend on your back. If one of you happens to get low on HP, then the other one can steer while the other one fights off the mobs. But I wouldn't get too happy just yet, since along with these changes, we also got the change that the mob is able to attack you with just the bottom of their hitbox, assuming your head's in range. And what that means is that if you have a build like a mob dropper that moves hostile mobs down to here, then you probably had to readjust it because of this update just to stay safe. And so if you wondered why your zombie grinder was all of a sudden hitting you when it didn't used to, this would be why. Who knows, maybe bring a horse down there. Have you ever thought of chorus fruit as scaffolding? Yeah, I can't say that I exactly have either. And apparently Mojang agrees, but only now. Since it's only in recent updates where the chorus flower can no longer provide support for hanging or standing blocks. So if you're trying to hang lanterns from your chorus flower, you're not gonna have any luck anymore. But I mean, really, just even saying that out loud, it doesn't sound like something I've ever wanted. I can't honestly say I think more about the chorus flower than harvesting it, but it was changed in 1.20.2, and I doubt they'll ever go back on this. Villagers got a huge debuff in some of the later 1.20 updates. Since while it's true that you're able to cure a villager from a zombie villager to get a discount, it's no longer possible to cure and re-zombify that villager multiple times to get a bigger and bigger discount. Since now it only gives that big discount on the first time, which makes machines like the ones that we've shown off in the past a lot less useful. But in fairness, being able to re-zombify the same villager to get mending books down to 1 emerald apiece, yeah, that seems pretty broken. So as long as there's still some discount, I guess it's fine. Although it does unfortunately mean that this trick that we've shown off in the past, to use librarian villagers to get infinite emeralds, that's no longer gonna work. Or at least it won't work on new villagers. If you have any beforehand, you'll probably be fine. Plenty of blocks when they're added to Minecraft come along with placeholder sounds. And I get it, why would you want to re-record all sounds for all the different blocks? Except now, that's no longer the case, since both sponges and wet sponges have their own custom sounds. And to put that in perspective, this is how they used to sound, and this is how they sound now. Which, I'll be honest, wouldn't be the first thing that I would hope to fix with the sponges. I mean, they're still a lot worse for draining an ocean monument than just dropping sand on it. But hey, at least for that brief time where you're using them where they don't need to be dried out, they'll at least sound unique while doing it, whatever that's worth. One of my favorite small changes that came in with Minecraft 1.20 was that Minecraft now stores chat history for commands across all worlds. And so what that would mean is that if you were using commands in one world and then went over to your test world to try it out, the last 50 commands that you had sent in chat will be remembered across your entire game session. And you can just press up or down in the chat and go to where that command was. Which, speaking as people who have to use a lot of commands across a lot of different worlds to record these videos, that's a welcome change for us for sure. And if you don't just want to look through chat to find all your recent commands, it's even better worth noting that if you go inside your games folder, you can find them all stored inside of a text file called Command History. With the Armored Paws update of 1.20.5, armadillos were a hard feature to miss. However, what came along with those armadillos might have just passed you by. Since while one of the main features is that spiders will run away from armadillos when they're not rolled up, you might not have noticed that cave spiders also have this behavior. And why is that important? Well, now you can consider bringing an armadillo with you when you go from the savanna biome over into the Badlands, since there they'll be able to help keep away the cave spiders that spawn inside the Badland mine shafts, or just mine shafts in general. It might be a little awkward bringing an armadillo down there, but it might just help you out if you're in a pinch. Well, an easy way to get an automatic armadillo scute farm is just to leave the armadillos be and have a hopper underneath. An even quicker one could be using a dispenser with a brush facing towards the armadillo to have it brush off the scute. Now granted, you are going to need more than a few brushes to do this, considering the fact that it takes 16 durability every time you use the brush. But if you don't want to be the one getting all your wolf armor, you can do it this way. Much like the collars for our wolves, the wolf armor is dyeable with 16 different dyes. However, unlike the dog collars, we're not just limited to those 16 specific shades, and instead this could be dyed a lot more similarly to how we dye our leather armor. And you'll see as much if you add multiple dyes in with the wolf armor. If you want to get a different hue, this is the way to go about it. And that means that if you technically want to get every wolf that's inside of Minecraft, you've got a lot more combinations to get than just the 9 different variants. While it would seem like our wolves will last longer now because they're able to wear armor, it's also true that our tamed wolves now have double the amount of health than they used to have. And at this point, they now have 20 hearts of health as compared to the original 10 hearts. And it's not just their health that got better, but also when you feed a wolf, it heals twice as many health points. Similarly to how it no longer takes half damage from most environmental sources like fire or cacti. That way, the way that we heal and treat these animals, as well as keep them away from certain hazards, has basically remained unchanged. They can just now withstand more damage from players and arrows. Now that Armadillos can drop Scute, Mojang had to clarify a few things. And so, much like how the clay was renamed to clay balls back in this update, the Scutes that are dropped from turtles are now renamed to turtle Scutes, making them more similar to the original name for this item when it was originally called turtle shell pieces. But yeah, I think what this means is that now that Mojang knows the official word for Scute, we'll see it everywhere as soon as we can. Watch the difference now between when you go through a nether portal before 1.20.5 and one now in recent updates. Now, there's not really a difference with the loading time, but rather what happens right in the middle when it's loading. Since instead of this weird eerie frame where it shows the dirt texture, it now will just show the animated nether portal texture with the same text on screen. And the same goes for when you go through the end portal, which I've got to say blends so much nicer. It's honestly kind of surprising this oversight existed for so long anyway. But now that it's fixed, it's really noticeable when you go back to the old one. Even if it's just a brief frame, it's hard to miss. And I'm glad it's now changed. And that's not the only place where Mojang got rid of the dirt backgrounds. Since now, if we were to open up our options tab, you'll see that in certain screens like controls or video settings, it's instead just been changed to a blurred background that still shows the world around you, which on a multiplayer server is way more helpful. I mean, the world is gonna pause around you, so you can still be a part of what's going on. And you can even change the amount of blurriness in the accessibility settings, whether you want it even blurrier than default or no blur at all. But if you're partial to the original dirt backgrounds, don't sweat it. Just go and turn on programmer art and they're still there. And on the main menu where the dirt background used to show, now it'll just show the main menu panorama that we've seen in all screens, which I do think also looks pretty nice. All in all, just a really slick feature. Spawn chunks are a debated part of the Minecraft community. While technical players love it because they're able to have their farms running at all hours with maximum efficiency, other players find it to be cheating. And it seems like Mojang's more aligned with that camp than some of us who prefer farms, but now they're not necessarily making the decision for you. Since while it is true that in recent updates, we've gone from having 19 by 19 chunks that were spawn chunks down to 3 by 3 chunks, they also give you a game rule command for spawn chunk radius to set what you want it to be. All the way from 0, where it completely disables spawn chunks, up to 32, which would be more than 3 times the amount of spawn chunks than we used to have. So for those players who want to go and search this out, they're not going to have to download a mod. But for other players who weren't using this in the first place, they're also going to have a lot less lag from this feature going forward. Overall, pretty nice. If you've ever brought a shulker over to the overworld, or set up base in the end, then you might be aware that shulkers are able to destroy armor stands, which I've got to say is just annoying. But nowadays, that's just no longer the case, since the shulker's sparks can no longer destroy armor stands. And the same is true for Llama Spit, though I've got to say, that's a neutral mob, and it seems a lot more situational. But now you can do all the wandering trader killing that you want to, and your armor stands won't have to suffer for it. And with that, folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video, so see if they're right and have a good one, alright?